Good morning, everyone, and welcome to an extraordinary neighborhood right here in Aurora, Ontario. This is actually the type of neighborhood that we have been working so hard for. You know, you can always tell you're in a great neighborhood when the neighbors are out talking to each other and supporting each other. And so that's one of the reasons we're very, very delighted to be here today. And it's my great pleasure this morning as well to introduce what I believe to be an extraordinary candidate for this community. Leah Taylor Roy grew up in York Region. She's worked for this community and for the betterment of this community for very many years. She's committed to serving the people of this community. And it's that commitment to service that I think really makes our candidate stand apart from all others. We are very fortunate in this election. It's an important election. But in this election, we have gone to Canada with the right plan for Canadians, the right plan for families, the right plan for climate, the right plan for the future of this country and to help us end this pandemic and build this country back better. We also have the benefit of an extraordinary leader. We have the right plan, the right leader, and for Aurora, the right candidate. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Leah Taylor Roy.
Thank you so much, Bill. And I want to start by acknowledging that the land we're standing on here today in Aurora is the land of the Anishinaabe, covered by the Treaty Williams Treaty, and Treaty 13, and the land we share with them with mutual respect. And I would also like to acknowledge and thank our hosts this morning, Stephanie and Brent, whose home we're in, whose backyard we're in, recent homeowners here in Aurora, and their mother, Jane, who has helped host this morning, as well as their neighbors who are here as well and have put a beautiful spread out for you this morning. So thank you to Parva and Amir and their lovely daughters. Thank you for being here this morning. As Bill said, my name is Leah Taylor Roy, and I am the proud Liberal candidate here in Aurora, Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill. I'm proud because our party has worked hard to protect Canadians through COVID, and we're going to continue to do that. And we have a leader and a team and a platform that's going to move Canada forward. Here in Aurora, Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill, like many places across the country, affordability is a major issue. Home ownership is difficult for so many people. And the Liberal Party has a platform to help people achieve that dream of owning their first home. I'm very proud to be part of this team and to work in our area on issues like affordability. And it's with great pleasure that I introduce this morning our leader of the Liberal Party, Justin Trudeau, who's going to be speaking as well on the issue of affordability across Canada and here in York Region. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Leah.
You're welcome. Oh,
Thank you very much, Leah, for your warm words. Thank you, Bill, as always, for being here. Thank you, Brent and Stephanie and Jane, for welcoming us to your home. You know, it was a real pleasure to speak with the three of you about the challenge of home ownership, about the hopes and dreams that so many young families starting out have, and about how challenging it is to get into the housing market. And that's why over the past number of years we've put forward a national housing strategy that has made significant investments across the country, including with the First-Time Homebuyers Initiative that has helped many young families purchase their new homes. But why we also know we needed to go even further. And that's why we put together a strong housing plan in this platform that recognizes that there's no one solution on housing, that we need to support many different types of families with many different challenges in many different parts of the country. So we focused on three main things. The first one was helping young families like Brent and Stephanie save more money quicker for a down payment with up to $30,000 in support from the federal government to help them buy their first home, but also things like a tax-free savings account towards home ownership that is going to make a huge difference in getting people to start building that equity for their families, for their future, earlier. We also know we have to increase supply, which is why we're putting $4 billion forward for municipalities to encourage them and support them as they ensure that there is more housing created and built, to have 1.4 million homes available in the coming years for Canadians. And finally, we also know that the housing market is a very difficult place to be in right now. You shouldn't have to lose 10 bidding wars in a row on the home you want. So we're bringing in a home buyer's bill of rights that removes predatory practices like blind bidding, cracks down on house flipping, makes sure we're keeping out foreign investors from looking at a home as an investment and not as a place to live. These are the things that we know we need to do to keep Canada moving forward, and we have the right plan for exactly that. Because we looked at the housing price crisis and we said, okay, what kind of measures can we apply to the housing crisis with the same intensity and urgency we did on the pandemic? Quand la pandémie a frappé, nous avions dû créer des nouvelles mesures pour aider les gens de façon rapide pour contrer cette crise-là. On a créé la PCU, on a créé la subvention salariale, des appuis pour les entreprises, des appuis pour les familles, des appuis pour les aînés. Parce que c'est en agissant de façon ferme et déterminée qu'on est en train de passer à travers la pandémie. Mais nous devons amener cette ambition, cette détermination aux autres enjeux auxquels les Canadiens font face, que ce soit la crise de logement, que ce soit la crise climatique, que ce soit les garderies, les besoins de place en garderie pour les familles. Et c'est pour ça qu'on est en conversation maintenant, c'est pour ça qu'on est en élection, parce qu'on veut que les Canadiens choisissent un gouvernement encore plus ambitieux, encore plus progressiste. Et c'est les plans qu'on met de l'avant. But of course, before we can step up on even more ambition to support families in buying their first home, to support Canadians in building a better future, in learning from the vulnerabilities exposed during this pandemic, on how we can and must do more for people. Before we can do all that, we need to make sure we're ending this pandemic for good. And the only way through this pandemic is with vaccinations. And that's why we have been absolutely unequivocal. We have been there to support the people across the country, the almost 80% of Canadians who've chosen to do the right thing and get vaccinated. These families, these individuals across the country deserve to be able to get back quickly to the things they love. Shouldn't be putting their kids at risk by exposing them to unvaccinated people on planes or airplanes, planes or trains. They should know that they're going to be able to avoid further lockdowns because people are doing the right thing. They should know that they can go to a gym or a movie theater or a restaurant without putting themselves further at risk of spreading or receiving COVID-19. That's why we are working with the provinces on vaccine passports, willing to foot the bill for them. That's why we've been unequivocal about planes and trains, and why it's so unbelievable that Mr. O'Toole won't respect the science, won't respect people who want to get back to normal, and take even the simplest step of demanding that all his candidates be vaccinated to lead by example. I think many people will have noticed that whenever Mr. O'Toole was pressed on the question of, are his candidates vaccinated? Does he support vaccination? His answer is, well, my wife and I recorded and filmed our own vaccination to encourage people to get vaccinated. Well, he recognizes the power of example. So why is he asking his own candidates to hide their vaccination status, even if they got vaccinated? We found out that only 15% of his candidates will admit to being vaccinated, partially because the party has told them, don't share if you're vaccinated. Now, why is that? We know that people get convinced when their neighbors, when their health professionals, when their family doctor, when their family members, when their MP or candidate says, I got vaccinated. We know that's part of the encouragement of getting vaccinated. And Mr. O'Toole is asking his candidates to hide their status from Canadians. Why? It's because he's not worried about protecting those people who've stepped up and done the right thing. He's worried about protecting anti-vaxxers in his caucus. Think about that for a moment. He is not standing with the almost 80% of eligible Canadians who've chosen to do the right thing because they want to end this pandemic. Because he's defending the freedoms and the choice of anti-vaxxers who are putting us all at risk. I'm here to protect the freedoms of those who did the right thing and who want to get back to school, to restaurants, to traveling, to vacations. I want to stand up for the choice of those who are there for their neighbors. Not those who are risking us all going into further lockdowns, of slowing our economic recovery, as we're seeing out west. Canada needs and deserves clear leadership when it comes to ending this pandemic. And we are the only party that is offering that. But that also goes to the core of the choice in this election and why we need this election so Canadians can give a clear direction that this is how we get through this pandemic. Unequivocally, by trusting science, by trusting each other to do the right thing. These are big issues. But even as we end this pandemic, as a government, we will be taking really big decisions in the coming weeks. Decisions on how we make sure that we recognize that women were harder hit during this pandemic, and therefore we need to do more to support women wanting to get back into the workplace, wanting to pursue careers. And the way to do that is with 250,000 high-quality, affordable childcare spaces at $10 a day across the country. That is the plan we've put forward. We've already signed with 8 out of 13 provinces and territories, touching about half the young families in this country. We need to finish that job. And not only will that job not be finished if Erin O'Toole gets elected, but he will rip up the deals that had already been signed, that were delivering half of the fees by next year for childcare, which will save thousands upon thousands of dollars for families, and $10 a day daycare in less than 5 years. Those are choices that matter, not just for families, not just for kids, not just for moms, but for our economy as well, as we need that growth, as we need people to re-engage in the workforce, as we need to create opportunities for businesses to thrive and expand. We can't continue to leave half of our population restricted in its choices to follow their dreams and build their careers. That's part of the choice in this election. There are other choices made. Do we keep assault weapons illegal? Or do we allow Erin O'Toole, with his secret deals with the gun lobby, to review and bring back assault weapons that we made illegal over a year ago? Do we continue to stand up unequivocally for women's rights? Monsieur O'Toole aime ça dire que c'est un leader pro-choix, mais ça ne l'est pas. Parce qu'un leader pro-choix va s'assurer que ses députés défendent sans équivoque le droit d'une femme de choisir. Or, M. O'Toole a permis à 80 de ses députés à voter contre le droit d'une femme de choisir. Mais voyons, le choix est extrêmement clair, surtout sur l'environnement. Les gens le savent. On est dans la crise de la pandémie, mais on est aussi dans une crise climatique. Et nous devons aborder cette crise-là, s'attaquer à cette crise-là avec la même intensité, créativité et ambition qu'on a lutté contre cette pandémie. We have to take on the climate crisis with the same strength and determination we took on the pandemic crisis with. And that's why we've leaned in on experts, on scientists, on the top policy minds across the country to put forward the most ambitious plan on fighting climate change Canada has ever seen. We will be putting an absolute cap on emissions from the oil and gas sector and decreasing that cap into the future until we reach net zero. We will be moving forward on a zero emission, net zero, on a net zero electricity grid across the country and 100% zero emission vehicles by 2035 in our new vehicles. Those are things that don't just protect the planet and continue the leadership that we've shown in putting a price on pollution all across the country, but it also ensures that the jobs and growth that we're going to be able to create as a country will remain strong and competitive in a world that is transforming its approach. The investments we made in some of Canada's largest steel plants to go from burning coal to electric arc over the coming years is exactly the example of both reducing emissions and securing jobs and careers in a competitive global industry for Canadians for decades to come. It's the natural extension of having been there to stand up to Trump on steel workers and aluminum workers, to continue to be there to support workers across this country as we fight climate change, as we create a better world. But again, Mr. O'Toole doesn't get that. He doesn't get that you can't have a plan for the economy if you don't finish this pandemic first with vaccinations. You can't have a plan for the economy if you're not serious about getting women back into the workforce and offering childcare. And you can't have a plan for the economy if you're not willing to step up in the fight against climate change. Because we know the world is. That's the challenge we're facing. Mr. O'Toole wants to bring us back to the Stephen Harper approach, the Stephen Harper targets that failed Canada, failed Canadians in the fight against climate change. When we took office, only 1% of our coasts and oceans were protected in Canada. We're now up to 14%, on our way to 25%, and 30% by 2030. These are things that we are doing to build a better future for all Canadians. Mr. O'Toole doesn't get that. And despite what the NDP likes to say, the choice is between a Conservative or a Liberal government right now. And it does make a difference to Canadians whether we have or not a progressive government. It is cynicism to pretend that 6 years of lifting 1 million people out of poverty, of creating 1 million jobs, of putting a price on pollution right across the country, of moving forward on reconciliation in tangible ways that have lifted 116 long-term boil water advisories and have a solid path and a plan and funding to finish the remaining few dozen. Those are the things that matter, that we have done. And Canadians right now get a choice. Parce que je le connais. Je connais comment ça fonctionne pour les progressistes dans ce pays. Ils prennent ce moment de se dire comment on va voter. On sait qu'on veut arrêter M. O'Toole et les conservateurs. On le comprend. Et le seul choix, c'est le Parti libéral. Mais les progressistes, on aime aussi voter pour le meilleur plan. On veut aussi en faire plus pour contrer les changements climatiques. On veut aussi en faire plus pour les familles, plus pour les travailleurs. Mais dans cette élection, c'est le Parti libéral qui, non seulement est le seul parti qui peut empêcher les conservateurs de gouverner, c'est le Parti libéral qui a le meilleur plan progressiste pour notre pays. Et ce n'est pas juste nous qui le disons, c'est les experts en climat, en garderie, en logement, qui sont en train de dire que le Parti libéral a le meilleur plan. This is the moment in the election where progressives go, oh, I know I really should vote Liberal because we don't want a Conservative government, and they're the only ones that can stop the Conservative government. But I really also want to vote for the party that is the most ambitious, the most progressive, that has the concrete plan that is going to help me and my family and move us forward in strong, progressive ways as a country. Well, in this election, the experts are all agreed that on climate change, on our housing plan, on childcare, it is the Liberal Party with the best, most ambitious plan, most progressive plan for this country. And you don't have to take my word for it. I challenge progressive voters to take 5 minutes to look at our platform, look at our solutions, look at what some of the top experts have said, from the former Green Party leader in BC, climate scientist Andrew Weaver, some of the top climate economists across the country. They've said consistently that ours is actually the best, most ambitious plan. And that's the choice facing Canadians right now. Do we move forward in a way that builds on the lessons we learned both about ourselves, about Canadians' abilities to step up during a crisis, and on moving forward in a real, consistent way for everyone? That's the choice Canadians get to take. That's the choice that I'm so excited about. Avancer ou reculer au soleil? Si ça va continuer de bouger, on va me mettre au soleil. Là. Je ne vais rien voir, mais je vais quand même pouvoir...
Merci beaucoup, Mr. Trudeau. Thank you, Mr. Trudeau. We'll now start the question period with Glenn Mangerger from CTV National News.
Good morning. When Canadians go to vote on Monday, it'll be the second time they've done so since you promised to get rid of the first-past-the-post system. You're reaching out to New Democrats and Green voters today. This is an important issue for them, proportional representation. If you are reelected into government, would you consider revisiting the issue? And also, to what extent does the apparent rise of the PPC factor into that thinking?
I have always been a fan of ranked ballots, where people get to choose first choice, second choice, third choice. I think it forces parties to come together and make a pitch to be the second choice of other voters, and therefore they are less divisive as elections. I am not a fan of proportional representation because it gives more weight to smaller parties that are perhaps fringe parties, as we've seen right now. But this is something that we approached years ago. There was no consensus. If ever there is more of a consensus, it could be interesting to follow up on, and I'd be open to that because I've never flinched in my desire for more for ranked ballots. But that's not the priority, and this is the first time in 36 days that anyone has asked me about election reform, electoral reform.
You say you'd be open to it, but would you consider introducing legislation on it?
It really depends on whether or not there is a consensus around all parties. You can't change the way people vote without having a clear consensus in amongst political parties. Okay. Je suis toujours en faveur d'un vote préférentiel dans ce pays. Je trouve que ce serait une bonne idée pour les gens de pouvoir choisir un premier choix, un deuxième choix, un troisième choix, non seulement parce que ça reflète plus la façon que les gens pensent quand ils s'approchent de la boîte du scrutin, mais aussi parce que ça forcerait les partis de faire un plaidoyer direct pour être le deuxième choix ou le troisième choix pour des voteurs d'autres partis. Ça amènerait moins de divisions, ce qu'on a vu beaucoup dans cette campagne électorale. Mais on ne peut pas changer notre façon de voter si il n'y a pas un consensus clair, et je ne suis pas en faveur du vote proportionnel. Je préfère de loin le vote préférentiel, mais tant qu'on n'a pas un consensus clair, on ne peut pas changer, on ne devrait pas changer notre mode électoral.
Prochaine question.
Bonjour, M. Trudeau, Raymond Filion de TVA. Vous avez commencé la campagne avec une bonne longueur d'avance. Or, on le voit encore aujourd'hui dans les sondages, c'est très serré. Alors, la question, est-ce que votre message résonne encore auprès des Canadiens? Êtes-vous encore l'homme de la situation?
Les conversations que j'ai eues avec les Canadiens d'un bout à l'autre de ce pays me démontre que les Canadiens reconnaissent d'abord à quel point on a passé des moments difficiles ensemble au cours des 18 derniers mois, mais aussi à quel point on a des choix importants à faire pour l'avenir et que ces choix doivent être faits maintenant sur les garderies, sur les armes à feu, sur le logement, sur les changements climatiques et les emplois, mais aussi sur comment on va en finir cette pandémie pour de bon. Et on a besoin de leadership fort, déterminé et clair, le genre de leadership que nous et notre équipe extraordinaire a démontré pendant cette pandémie et pendant 6 ans.
M. Blanchet, hier, a dit qu'un gouvernement minoritaire, ce serait un désaveu de votre habitude centralisatrice. Est-ce que ce serait un désaveu, selon vous, M. Trudeau, un gouvernement minoritaire?
On va voir ce que les Canadiens vont choisir avant de tirer des conclusions. La réalité, c'est que les Canadiens sont en train de dire qu'ils savent qu'on a eu des vulnérabilités démontrées pendant cette pandémie pour nos aînés, dans nos systèmes de santé, pour nos familles à travers le pays. Et je sais que les gens veulent des résultats pour améliorer leur communauté, leurs services. Nous allons être là pour continuer de travailler en partenariat, comme on l'a fait avec toutes les provinces dans cette pandémie, mais aussi pour les garderies, aussi pour l'aérospatiale avec M. Legault, pour l'Internet large bande. On a été là en bon partenaire et on va continuer de l'être pour livrer concrètement pour les Québécois et tous les Canadiens.
Good morning, Steve Scheer, Reuters. On Monday, whatever the result, whether a Liberal majority, Liberal minority, loss, is there a scenario in which this is your last election?
I understand that you are all very focused on what happens after Monday. I'm focused on getting to Monday. I'm focused on making sure that Canadians understand the choice that they have before them of moving forward on things like childcare, on keeping assault weapons illegal, on things like a strong housing strategy to support young families, on fighting climate change, and on ending this pandemic for good. And that choice is extremely clear, but extremely stark as well. Because the position the Conservative Party is taking on all those things will not move Canada forward. It'll take Canada back. And that choice between moving forward or backwards is what I am focused on right now, because that will be the most important conclusion of what it means on Tuesday, the choice that Canadians made. Do we continue to move forward with even more ambition for this country and the tools to do it, or do we go back?
Prochaine question.
M. Trudeau, vous avez dit que le Parlement, le dernier Parlement, était dysfonctionnel. Ne pensez-vous pas que le déclenchement de cette élection pourrait envenimer les choses davantage si vous obtenez une minorité? Avec qui vous allez pouvoir travailler?
Je vais pas faire des réponses à des questions hypothétiques maintenant. Nous travaillons pour faire élire des Québécois, des Canadiens extraordinaires d'un bout à l'autre de ce pays, parce que nous avons le meilleur plan pour livrer concrètement pour les Canadiens avec l'ambition nécessaire. On se trouve dans cette élection parce qu'il y a tellement des choix clairs et il y a tellement des perspectives différentes entre les partis, que c'est aux Canadiens de choisir la direction, pas juste pour le gouvernement, mais pour le Parlement aussi. Et tous les gens qui vont être élus dans ce 44e Parlement vont avoir consulté les Canadiens, vont être là pour représenter leur vue sur comment on va finir avec cette pandémie, ce qu'on n'a pas eu comme discussion en 2019, mais aussi comment on va rebâtir en mieux.
Combien de temps, d'après vous, survivrait un gouvernement minoritaire? Est-ce que votre estimation de 18 mois tient toujours?
C'était pas mon estimation, c'est la moyenne, la durée de vie des parlements minoritaires au Canada. Mais j'espère que suite à cette élection, le choix va avoir été tellement clair de la part des Canadiens d'avancer, d'en finir avec la pandémie, d'investir dans les garderies, d'être là pour les familles qui veulent s'acheter un logement, de lutter contre les changements climatiques et créer des emplois, que nous allons pouvoir, dans ce consensus, avancer fortement pour le pays, mais le choix est très clair entre un parti conservateur qui ne veut pas faire rien de ça pour les Canadiens, qui est en train de se cacher, de démontrer du mauvais leadership auprès des Canadiens, et un gouvernement qui continue d'avoir une vision ambitieuse et progressiste de l'avenir et surtout l'équipe et les moyens de le livrer.
Next question.
Good morning, Christy Kirkup with the Globe and Mail. Today you have referenced the word trust, and you've referenced the word trust throughout the campaign. Other parties have said that you can't be trusted, and they have also noted that you promised that you would not have an election during a pandemic, and yet here we are. So my question for you this morning is, why should Canadians trust you?
First of all, right now, almost 80% of eligible Canadians have been vaccinated. We are seeing a fourth wave. It is concentrated amongst unvaccinated people. It is concentrated actually in those conservative Western provinces that didn't move forward as strongly on vaccination as other parts of the country. So the question on who Canadians trust to get through this pandemic is a core question that they're going to have to ask themselves, because everyone across this country wants to see this pandemic end. And telling Canadians that even though 80% of you have done the right thing and can get back to all sorts of normality, whether it's going to the grocery store, gathering with friends in a park, or even going to movie theaters with vaccine passports, but oh no, you can't choose the future of your country, is a little bit nonsensical on behalf of the other leaders. The reality is Canadians deserve to make a clear choice. And when you talk about trust, and we just find out that Aaron O'Toole has not only been untrustworthy on assault weapons, untrustworthy on his commitment to a women's right to choose, but has been untrustworthy on vaccinations in that he has told his candidates to hide their status, vaccinated or not, from the media, from Canadians, because he's busy protecting the anti-vaxxers in his party who would be part of his government if he got elected. That is a fundamental breach of trust for Canadians that I think is inexcusable in this pandemic situation.
But respectfully, we're not talking about Aaron O'Toole. I'm asking a question of you. There are instances where you have not kept your word. So why should Canadians trust you, Prime Minister?
I think Canadians know that in a pandemic situation, in a crisis situation, any leader needs to fall back on his core values, because things are moving so quickly. You're having to be so creative about how you deliver things like the CERB or the wage subsidy quickly, that Canadians saw that this government could be trusted to have their backs. That's what we did, because those are our values of being there for Canadians. Did we do it perfectly? Absolutely not. Nobody would. This is a never-before situation. But what we did was push as hard as we could, as fast as we could, to keep Canadians supported, to keep small businesses going, so that we could get through this pandemic safely and have our economy come roaring back as quickly as possible. That's what real leadership was able to deliver for Canada. We're now one of the top countries in the world in terms of vaccination rates because of confidence and trust in our institutions, in our doctors, and yes, in our federal government. These are the things that make a difference in a time of crisis, and right now we're facing many crises, not just the pandemic, but climate change, a crisis of affordability for homes, for childcare. These are the things that this government is excited about moving forward on with the best plan, with the most ambition for all Canadians. And that's why I'm excited about the choice Canadians get to make on Monday. Do we take Canada back with the Conservatives, or do we move forward for everyone?
Next question.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Is this your last election?
This is the election I'm in right now that I am excited about. I have said many times I'm not engaging in speculation, but I think hypothetical speculation, but I think what people have seen is that the work that we are doing is not done yet. We have to continue to step up in the fight against climate change. We have to continue, even after we lifted hundreds of thousands of kids out of poverty, to continue to move forward on supporting young families with things like $10 a day childcare. We need to continue to step up on helping young families afford their new homes. We need to continue to defend our seniors and support them into a dignified retirement. There is lots of work still to do, and I'm nowhere near done yet. Okay. Je n'ai même pas presque fini toutes les grandes choses que j'ai l'intention de continuer à accomplir avec les Canadiens pour continuer de lutter contre les changements climatiques et démontrer qu'on crée des bons emplois et des bonnes carrières à ce niveau-là. D'être là pour les familles, avec des places en garderie, avec de l'aide pour acheter une première maison. D'être là pour défendre les droits des Canadiens, la sécurité des Canadiens, en étant sans équivoque sur le droit d'une femme de choisir, mais aussi sans équivoque sur plus de contrôle d'armes à feu, pas moins de contrôle d'armes à feu comme les conservateurs veulent. On a encore beaucoup à accomplir ensemble et moi je suis extrêmement enthousiaste, pas seulement des jours à venir, mais des années à venir ensemble.
On another topic, and I'm hoping that you can answer the substance of the question and not the talking points. I understand you have a message to give, especially before the writ on Monday, but I'm wondering with the debate that happened over the English debate in Quebec, if you think English Canada doesn't understand the nuances of the identity debate in Quebec.
I think it is really important to make sure that Canadians listen to each other and that we avoid the kinds of broad generalizations that has led to Quebec bashing in far too many situations. There are important fundamental principles at play, and branding an entire nation as racist, implicitly or explicitly, is wrong. My job as a Canadian Prime Minister, my job as a proud Quebecer, is to make sure that we are having important and difficult conversations about how we move forward in a way that protects people's rights, supports the French language, allows for continued strength of identity, while making sure we're making room for everyone. And I know that those things are not anything that any individual or leader would disagree with. The conversations about how to have those conversations, about how to get those done, well, that requires a strength of conviction, of values, of leadership that moves forward in a respectful way that brings people together. That's what I've demonstrated every step of the way. That's what I'll continue to.
Prochaine question.
Bonjour, M. Trudeau, Mélanie Marquis, La Presse. Je vais rester sur la question du débat. Ça a été un échange, moins d'une minute, qui, on a l'impression, a marqué un virage dans la campagne, a vraiment changé la dynamique, en particulier au Québec, même si c'est un débat en anglais. Qu'est-ce que ça vous inspire comme réaction, comme sentiment, que cet événement-là change à ce point-là la campagne?
Ben, on voit encore que le Bloc québécois essaye de garder un monopole sur la fierté québécoise, sur la fierté de la nation québécoise. Et je trouve que c'est dommage, parce que pendant les 6 dernières années, on avait énormément de Québécois forts à Ottawa, au sein du Conseil des ministres, pour livrer concrètement pour les Québécois, pour défendre la culture et l'identité québécoise, défendre la langue française, et ça ne se fait pas en opposition. Ce n'est pas avec la rhétorique qu'on livre pour les familles, ni qu'on va aider la langue française au Québec et partout au pays. C'est avec des actions concrètes. Une modernisation de la loi sur les langues officielles qui reconnaît l'importance et la particularité du Québec, et du français, y compris au Québec. Qui vont être là, pas juste pour parler de la défense des arts et de la culture, mais pour livrer pour nos artistes, pour ceux qui travaillent sur les plateaux de tournage, pour les créateurs, pour les rêveurs. On a été là avec la PCU, avec des aides directes pour eux, mais on a été là aussi pendant des années pour renverser les coupures de M. Harper que, disons-le directement, le Bloc n'a rien pu faire pour empêcher en opposition sous un gouvernement conservateur. Gilles Duceppe et le Bloc défendaient la culture, défendaient les travailleurs du milieu culturel au Québec, sans pouvoir pour une seconde convaincre M. Harper de ne pas couper et abandonner le sort des artistes et de la culture au Québec. Ce n'est pas le Bloc qui peut faire une différence si un gouvernement conservateur se fait élire. Les Québécois méritent d'avoir des gens forts et fiers qui vont se battre pour eux, pour leurs valeurs, pas seulement en opposition avec le Bloc, mais au pouvoir avec le Parti libéral. C'est ça le choix auquel les Canadiens font face, auquel les Québécois font face lundi.
Mais ce n'est pas le Bloc québécois qui a posé la question. J'aimerais savoir si vous avez l'impression qu'à cause de cette question-là, vos chances ont diminué au Québec.
Moi, les conversations que j'ai avec les Québécois, et ça a été soulevé quand M. Legault a parlé de sa préférence pour un gouvernement fédéral plus faible sous M. O'Toole. M. Blanchette, certainement, préfère avoir beaucoup plus de Québécois en opposition qu'au gouvernement. Mais moi, quand je parle aux familles québécoises, aux mères québécoises, aux jeunes Québécois, ils veulent une lutte plus forte contre les changements climatiques, ce que seul un gouvernement progressiste peut livrer. Un parti conservateur va nous ramener en arrière, et si les gens qui votent Bloc assurent l'élection d'un parti conservateur à Ottawa, on va reculer en arrière sur les changements climatiques au lieu d'avancer. Ce n'est pas le Parti conservateur qui va tenir tête contre les provinces de l'Ouest qui voulaient reculer contre les changements climatiques, qui ne voulaient pas un prix sur la pollution à travers le pays. On les a battus à la Cour suprême du Canada. Ça prend un gouvernement fort, plein de gens qui partagent nos valeurs, comme les Québécois le font, pour avancer. Donc c'est ça le choix auquel font face les Québécois. Est-ce qu'on veut un gouvernement qui va livrer pour plus de places en garderie? C'est pas avec le Bloc qu'on a négocié ces places en garderie, ces transferts vers le Québec sans condition. C'est avec le gouvernement du Québec. Le Bloc essaie de s'approprier de notre bilan progressiste, disant « Oh, on a poussé le gouvernement dans cette direction-là. » Bien, la preuve, c'est qu'ils n'ont pas pu pousser un gouvernement conservateur dans cette direction-là. Et quand ils sont d'accord avec nous sur nos valeurs progressistes, ils essayent d'en prendre le crédit. Les Québécois savent que le choix entre un gouvernement progressiste, libéral, qui va continuer d'avancer sur nos valeurs, nos priorités, c'est ça qui est sur la table dans cette élection. C'est ça auquel nous nous affrontons comme choix. Et c'est pour ça que je suis tellement optimiste de voir des Québécois et Québécoises forts et fortes à travers le Québec se faire élire pour le Parti libéral du Canada parce qu'on sait que c'est le moment de choisir d'avancer ensemble.
Next question.
Abigail Beeman, Global News. We're down to really the final hours of this national election campaign, and you're spending 2 days in Southern Ontario. Why?
I am spending time with candidates right across the country to talk about this amazing team we have. Leah Taylor Roy, Bill Blair here with me today. Others right across the country that I can't wait to see over the coming days to emphasize that this choice is really important. Do we go back as a country with conservatives who want to rip up $10 a day childcare deals, restore assault weapons to our streets, be soft and equivocate when it comes to defending a woman's right to choose, and worse, not be determined to end this pandemic for good through vaccinations, asking candidates to hide their vaccination status from Canadians, to not embarrass anti-vaxxers in their party? Come on, you got to choose Canadians in this situation. You got to stand with the 80% of almost 80% of Canadians who've done the right thing, who want to get back to normal, who don't want to get back into lockdowns. So this choice Canadians are facing right now really matters. Do we let Conservatives take Canada back, or do we move forward for everyone?
I didn't ask you about the choice that you're putting to Canadians. I asked you specifically why you're spending so much time in Southern Ontario.
I'm happy to be with candidates here in Ontario and right across the country. The message of this choice that Canadians are facing, of letting Conservatives take us back or choosing a strong, progressive, ambitious government with the best plan And you don't have to take our words for it. You can look at the top experts in climate, the top experts in childcare, the top experts in housing, who've said that ours is the best, most concrete, most ambitious plan for moving forward. And we're going to share that message right across the country all the way to Monday.
Next question.
Good morning, Morgan Lowry, Canadian Press. So you talk a lot about the need to end the pandemic for good. I was hoping you can maybe look to the future and tell me your vision of what the end of the pandemic means for you, and how can you be so sure that vaccination alone is enough to end it?
Well, we know, first of all, that there are constantly new variants that are going to be developed until vaccinations are available all around the world, which is why Canadians can be reassured that not only are we leading the world on vaccinations right now with people who are double vaxxed, not only have we secured enough vaccines right now in this country for every single eligible Canadian to go get themselves vaccinated, to do their part, not just to protect themselves and their loved ones, but to end this pandemic for good. But we've also, and they're there waiting for you. If you haven't yet and got vaccinated, go do that. It's the right thing to get back to normality, to get back to the things you love, but also to keep everyone safe and to get through this pandemic as quickly as possible. But we've also secured contracts for the kinds of booster shots that may well be necessary in the coming years as we continue to keep Canadians safe and our economy going, despite the challenges that this pandemic will represent for many years to come. This is why we've been investing in domestic production of pharmaceuticals again, signing with Moderna so that they actually move forward to be able to create mRNA vaccines that will keep Canadians safe and contribute to vaccinations around the world. We continue to know that investing in science and vaccination is the way forward, while Aaron O'Toole continues to tell his candidates to hide their vaccination status from Canadians so as not to embarrass the anti-vaxxers that he so desperately wants to be part of his party, part of his government.
Next question.
Good morning, Ashley Burke, CBC News. When it comes to the candidate in Spadina, Fort York, why is it that the media continually have to keep doing your party's job and vet candidates? And why should Canadians have trust or confidence that there are other issues with your team that you just don't know about, especially after you're dropping a candidate just 2 days before this election?
First of all, I am happy to stand here and defend the work that media does as an essential part of our democracy. Your job is to make sure that people can see what their leaders are doing, hold their leaders to account, and we will always be there to support and thank members of the press for doing the important work of bringing things forward, of challenging all parties and anyone who wants to lead this country and holding leaders to account. That is really important, and as a government and as a party, we will always defend your ability to do that. Quite frankly, when information came forward, we took immediate action. We stopped the campaign, the Liberal campaign in Spadina, Fort York. We followed the processes that are in place at the party to ascertain and to look into this, and we've come to the conclusion that this individual can no longer be a Liberal candidate in this election. It is a difficult but important thing to do because it's the right thing to do. We will continue to work to make sure that Canadians see that ours is the best team, the best plan, the most ambitious plan for this country, the clearly progressive, concrete vision for the future, and make clear contrasts with other parties.
But why does your party keep missing issues like this, not properly vetting candidates? Do you take responsibility for
First of all, as a party, we have taken extremely seriously the importance of supporting survivors, supporting and listening to anyone who comes forward with allegations. And we have, in fact, put forward processes from the very beginning that are stronger than had ever been put forward before for the party, for institutions, for government, that is allowing people to come forward and be supported and allow us to continue to move forward on making sure that everyone who stands for the Liberal Party is going to defend everyone's rights, defend the rights of survivors, the rights of people to have a safe workplace. We've been unequivocal about that. We will continue to make sure we're standing on the right kinds of processes and, yes, improve on our processes when there are challenges that come forward that show that we haven't gone far enough or that we haven't been strong enough. We are constantly reviewing and improving the process because, I'll be honest, we don't want to be in situations like this again.
Next question.
Hi, Mr. Trudeau, Tom Perry, CBC. I just wanted to ask you how important you think these last few hours, really, of the campaign are. Do you think this is when Canadians are really making up their minds? And if I could ask you as well, you've been talking a lot in your speeches and today about the choices that, or the choice that Canadians are facing. If you could boil it down, I guess, to one basic question, what do you think Canadians are being asked to decide in this election?
In this election, Canadians are being asked what they want the future to look like. Because there are some very different visions for the future, both the near future and the longer term future, on offer by the different parties competing for government. We are offering a vision that is unequivocal on following the science and standing up for those people who've done the right thing to end this pandemic as quickly as we possibly can and get back to the things we love as quickly as we possibly can. And that means things like vaccination on planes and trains. It means things like federal public servants. It means supporting and paying for vaccine passports across the country. It means being unequivocal about the fact that if someone wants to serve as an MP for the Liberal Party of Canada, they need to be fully vaccinated. So part of the choice about what the future looks like means how and whether we end this pandemic for good as quickly as we can. But there are also, at the same time, as we come out of this pandemic, people are making really big decisions in governments across this country about how to respond to the vulnerabilities and the gaps shown by this pandemic, but how also to leverage some of the things we've learned to do and be there for each other through this pandemic as Canadians to go even faster and harder on the big issues. And that's what we're proposing. $10 a day childcare. Quality spaces available right across the country. That's a big thing that's coming out of this pandemic that is on the table, that you get if we elect a progressive Liberal government, that you don't get if you choose Erin O'Toole and the Conservatives who want to take Canada back. We get to go to Glasgow in a few months for the next COP to talk about how Canada is continuing to step up and putting an absolute cap on oil and gas sector emissions and decreasing them to net zero over the coming years. Or we get Mr. O'Toole showing up in Glasgow in a few months to say, yeah, never mind the more ambitious targets that the previous government had put forward, not just a plan, but concrete action to hit. We're going to back up in our targets to take us back to 6 years ago, where we had lower ambition on fighting climate change, lower ambition on the jobs of the future. That's part of the choice Canadians get to make. On legalizing assault weapons once again, on supporting young families trying to buy a new home, on standing up unequivocally for women's rights. Those are all on the table. So the question Canadians have to ask themselves right now is, do we want a strong, ambitious, progressive future for Canada where we learn how we stood there for each other and supported each other through this pandemic and build a better future on that? Or do we go backwards?
And on those in the last few hours of the campaign, do you think there's room for movement in these last few hours?
What I'm seeing right across the country is Canadians who are engaging with this campaign, looking at the clarity and the starkness of the choice of forward with the Liberals or back with the Conservatives, but also progressives who are realizing that, wow, this time the most progressive platform, the most ambitious platform, the most concrete and deliverable, real platform by any of the progressive parties out there is actually the Liberal Party. Progressive Canadians are able to say, wow, I can vote to both stop the Conservatives and deliver a positive vision for this country that will make our lives better in the most ambitious way at the same time by voting Liberal. I think Canadians are realizing that right across the country and are excited about that opportunity on Monday to choose forward.
On va prendre une dernière question.
Catherine Lévesque, la presse canadienne. Bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau. Est-ce que vous êtes satisfait de la campagne que vous avez menée? Puis est-ce qu'il y a quelque chose que vous auriez fait différemment?
Oh, écoute, comme dans la pandémie, comme dans la campagne, il y a toujours des choses qu'on dit « j'aurais donc dû, j'aurais donc pu ». La réalité, la réalité, c'est qu'on a mené une campagne positive où on a été très clair sur les contrastes, mais je n'ai pas attaqué personnellement Monsieur O'Toole. J'ai démontré que je suis tout à fait en désaccord avec son approche sur les décisions, sur le style de leadership qu'il met de l'avant, et ça, c'est important. Mais c'est une campagne axée sur le choix qu'on a pour l'avenir, le choix important qui se prend maintenant. Pas dans quelques mois, pas dans 1 an, pas dans 2 ans, mais maintenant, pour la direction de notre pays et le genre de gouvernement que les gens veulent avoir. Donc, c'est à ce niveau-là que nous allons continuer de passer ce message pour ce choix positif que les Canadiens peuvent faire dans cette élection.
Et qu'est-ce que vous auriez fait différemment? Vous sauriez donner une réponse.
Écoutez, on va avoir beaucoup de temps mardi, mercredi pour parler de ces éléments-là. Pour l'instant, moi, ma priorité doit être de partager mon enthousiasme pour un monde meilleur, pour un Canada plus fort, où on protège les gens contre les changements climatiques en créant des emplois, où on aide les familles avec plus de garderies, on aide les familles à s'acheter une maison, on protège nos aînés avec plus d'argent dans leur poche, on investit dans l'avenir de toutes sortes de différentes façons. Le choix qui se prend maintenant, c'est un choix fondamental pour les Canadiens. Est-ce qu'on avance avec optimisme et ambition pour finir avec cette pandémie et rebâtir en mieux? Est-ce qu'on recule en arrière avec les conservateurs?
Merci beaucoup. C'est ce qui m'a fait la conférence de presse d'aujourd'hui.
Merci tout le monde.